Obedience, we have this idea in our head that obedience means when somebody tells us something, we just do it. That's it. It's just done. But in this supplication, the Imam takes us through a journey, and there are 5 stages in this supplication. But he takes us through this journey, and we began this journey off by the Imam mentioning this, Allahumma alhimna ta'atik. That, oh Allah, inspire me with your obedience. Give me this inspiration with your obedience. Now, I want to say something here, that this concept of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspiring us, inspiring our soul, it's so deeply embedded in Quran that Quran speaks about this, that it is the soul that requires that inspiration for taqwa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this, that you all know this ayah, He inspired the soul towards what? Taqwaha, towards taqwa, towards God consciousness. So we know that faith, iman, taqwa, all of these things comes from this point of inspiration. That this is where it starts. That we can't move forward in religion without this inspiration. Now, it's very interesting because Ramadan, Shahru Ramadan, has been mentioned in the Quran as this month where we learn taqwa. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, that you learn taqwa, that you learn how to have taqwa. But herein is the problem. The problem is that the taqwa is not just a cognitive thing. It's not something you just take a book and you read and you say, oh, I have taqwa. A lot of times we think this when we're young, and we find out that that's not the case, that you can't just read a book and gain taqwa from it. Now, it's very interesting because sometimes we don't learn that as we get older. We even become parents, and we think that taqwa is something that is handed to a child, given to a child. You give them a book, you send them to Sunday school, and the soul will become inspired. We imagine this, right? That if you just give information to a human being, that they're going to take that information and they will just magically follow religion. But so the Imam starts off with this. He says that he begins off with obedience to God, that before I obey you, O Allah, that just inspire my soul for obedience. Give me something so that I want to obey you, that I want to approach you. Now, for that, it's very interesting because when the Imam continues in this particular supplication, the next verse in the supplication is the Imam asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make deviance or to make sin very far from him. This is the second line in this dua, that, oh Allah, make this sin very far from me. So 2 things are happening here. The first thing is that the Imam is saying, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, understanding that obedience to you, God, oh Allah, can't come without me asking you. I have to come to you in humility, and I have to just ask you. Inspire me to obey you. And if you do not inspire me to obey you, then even that obedience that's taught to me, that I do for ritual reasons, because many times we practice religion for ritualistic reasons. I'm not saying it's bad, but ritualistic reasons don't last. They fade. If I pray, I fast, I'm taught to pray, I'm taught to fast, I'll do it. I'll practice it. But eventually that thing fades. Eventually it passes. And what happens is the soul becomes tired. The soul becomes very exhausted. This is why when you see people, they practice religion, they do these rituals for years and years and years and years and years, and they look sometimes so unhappy. You know, it's interesting. The hadith that I mentioned last night, the Imam says, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says that obedience becomes the delight of the heart. That it becomes something that's just very beautiful to the heart, that we enjoy in the heart. But the question is what happens when obedience becomes something that actually leads us to doubt? We're doing something, we're practicing, and we're practicing so much that we're doing it as a ritual. And I'm not saying don't do it. We should still do it. No matter what, we should still do it. Because maybe in that practice, something will inspire us. But when we practice and practice and practice and we don't look for what inspires the soul, sometimes the soul gets exhausted, gets tired. And sometimes the soul can even get fed up. You know, so when I meet young people, a lot of times young people will say, yeah, I'm just tired of this. I'm just tired. And I'm like, you're tired? You're just like 19. Jeez, imagine me. Okay? But what's happening to the soul is becoming tired of doing a ritual. It's not becoming tired of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The soul will never become tired of God. It's in our fitrat that the soul is always seeking God out. It's seeking its target out, no matter what. It's searching for something. But when you take that goal out, when you take that thing out, and you replace it with just pure ritual, then the soul says, I'm not getting what I wanted. I keep doing this over and over and over again, and I'm not getting anything in return. I'm not feeling anything in return. And a matter of fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He says in Surah Hujurat, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانِ, that I have made Iman beautified to you. I have made you love it. So then why don't people love it? So now the Imam talks about this first step. This first step is that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to inspire us. The second step is that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, make this disobedience to you far from me. Get it away from me. The third step in this supplication is the Imam says to Allah, and oh Allah, make these clouds of doubt, get these clouds of doubt away from me. So what's happening here? When we talk about, we talked about obedience. I said that we think in our mind obedience is this idea that I hear and I obey. And that's true. That obedience is when I hear something, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells me something, I just read it and I say, okay. But the reason that I say okay is because I feel something in my heart that tells me, I'll do it. I'll sacrifice. I'll have patience. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You know, it's really interesting. If you see the two the generations that we have now, there are several generations growing up, even in the Muslim community. There are maybe at least 2 or 3 generations now. And the older generation, when I talk to the older generation, they're really interesting. They'll come to me and they'll say, Brother Kauthar, my son, my daughter, they have this doubt about Islam. And I say, okay, well, what did you tell them? And they look at me, they get this face, and they say, I don't get these. Just do what it says. That's it. Just do it. I say, oh, okay. Well, what do they say? And they say, they don't make any sense. They just come with this doubt, and they listen to this person, and they read this. They get very confused. I don't know what all this is, what all this nonsense is. And they get very frustrated, right? Now, I want to point to something. We get into these conversations about, we're constantly talking about youth, and sometimes it's not just about youth. This happens now, it's happening to older people too even. Older people meaning even people not in their teens. It was happening to people in their teens, they get doubt. Then people in their 20s got doubt. Now then people in their 30s are getting doubt. Now people in their 40s are getting doubt. Now sometimes a few people here you'll see in their 50s, they get doubt, they'll get shak. Now, part of this reason is when I talk to people, when I ask people, especially young people, they always come to me and they say, well, I don't do this. I just want to let you know I don't pray. I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? They say, well, why do I have to pray? I said, I don't know. Why do you think you have to pray? They say, well, I don't know. My parents just tell me I have to pray, so I'm wondering what's the reason for it. Now, herein is the problem. This is very important. We have taught our children to look for these cognitive reasons. And I'm not saying these cognitive reasons are not good. We have overemphasized this. We have said, I get parents all the time that tell me this. They tell me, can you talk to my son? Can you talk to my daughter? And I'll say, talk to them about what? They don't believe in Islam. And I'll always say this. I'll say, okay, well, sometimes I'll say this. I said, I'm like the most uninspiring person. Why would I talk to your son or daughter? And they just look at me strange. They said, no, I want you to convince them. And I always say this. It has nothing to do with convincing people. It has to do with inspiring the soul. Your child is not inspired by Islam. They're not inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this eventually happens. The parent says, okay, just talk to them. I say, okay, sure, I'll talk to them. So I sit down and I talk to them. And inevitably, even the child is looking for a reason to believe in Islam. Even they're going in the wrong direction. They're saying, okay, I want to know a reason. Give me a reason. And I always say the same thing. I say, I don't have a reason for you. Sure, there's a ton of logical reasons to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But why is it you don't believe in Him? If I give you a reason, the most logical reason in the world, will you believe in God? I always ask this. And they look at me in this strange way and they say, no, maybe not. I said, okay, so you don't need a reason. So sometimes the idea that people have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a wrong idea. It's an incorrect idea. So how we teach children about God, who we teach God is that wrong thing. So as children grow up, what we teach them is we teach them that Allah is a certain way and the world is a certain way. And they believe it. They take our word for it. And more importantly, what they do is they take our actions for it. however they see religion taught to them is what they perceive about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we teach them religion in a very ugly way, they believe that whatever God does is ugly. If we teach religion in a very beautiful way, what they believe about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that Allah is very beautiful. This is how people learn religion. So I ask young people, when they come to me, I ask them this question. I say, okay, does religion make sense to you? And they say, yeah, it makes sense to you. I said, okay, so why don't you feel it? I always ask them, I go, what do you feel about religion? They always say that I feel religion is angry. I feel religion is abusive. I feel religion is difficult. Okay, these are perceptions that people have about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, and when that child develops that perception of God himself, then they abandon religion. Okay, they leave religion when they can. They do the ritual until they're 18, and then they say, okay, I'm done. So I've told this story many times before. I told it in my Sunday class. I'm going to say this story here, and then we'll wrap up in a few minutes with a few hadith. Please recite Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So I'll just share this story again. I was teaching at a particular Sunday school. As I was teaching at the Sunday school, I was warned at the Sunday school that the Sunday school teacher before me quit. And then, I went to that Sunday school teacher and I said, I heard that you quit this class. Is there any advice you can give me for this class? And they looked at me and they said, oh, you're the new teacher? And they said, good luck. I said, oh, okay. He said, no, I don't want to say anything, but just good luck to you. So I said, okay, how long have you been teaching these kids? And he said to me, I've been teaching them for about maybe 3 months. I said, oh, that's strange. We're more than halfway through the year. Who was teaching before you? So they told me so-and-so was teaching before me. I said, okay, let me go talk to that person. Went to that person, began to talk to that brother. I said, I heard you were teaching the Sunday school class. Now this is a class between maybe 14 and 18. They had a wide range here. So he said, yeah, I was teaching the class. And then I said, all right, well, can you tell me anything about the class? And he said, I can't tell you too much about the class except this, that the first day I was there, they threw a book at me. So I said, okay. All right. I said, okay, I get it. He said, are you the new teacher? I said, yeah, I'm supposed to be the new teacher. He said, okay, good luck. So I said, all right, this class couldn't be that bad, right? So I went to this class, and there were 40 students in the class, boys and girls, in an area about the size of a little bit bigger than one of these carpets, maybe 1.5 of these carpets. 40 kids were smashed in, squeezed in, and it was boys and girls smashed in. So I went to this class, and I walked in, and they're all talking and babbling and talking. And so when I got to the class, I started talking to them, and it was just trying to calm them down. So the first thing I did is I said, okay, you guys, come on. We're going outside. And they said, no, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking you guys outside. So he said, you can't do that. I said, I know, let's go outside. So we go outside, And then I created that space where these kids could breathe. Then I started teaching the class, and they said, okay, well, you have to teach from the book. So I opened up the book, and I looked at the book. And now I've given probably thousands of Islamic lectures, and I've read several books. And I looked at this book, and I said, and I like boring books. I read this book, and I said, oh my God. I said, I wouldn't want to come to Sunday school reading this book. So I closed the book. I said, we're not going from this book. They said, no, you have to go from the book. I said, yeah, I know, but I'm not going from the book. So then I proceeded to tell them a story for an hour, okay? So I don't want to get into the story. I told them the story for an hour, and then I let them go. They all came back the next week, dead silent, listening and attentive. Almost. This was a group. But during that semester, I became very close to this group. And when I spoke to the parents, I remember having a parent-teacher conference, sitting down with the parents. And the parent came to me, and the parent said, one of the parents was very interested in meeting me, and she said to me, she said, what exactly are you teaching my daughter? And I said, it's just Sunday school material. And she looked at me kind of really strange. She said, I said, why, is there something wrong? Did she say I said something incorrect? She said, no, she just wants to come to Sunday school. And it's kind of strange. Okay, now, keep in mind, this particular young lady was somebody that the Sunday school wanted to kick out because she was so rowdy, much rowdier than the boys, right? The boys used to kind of like run away from her. So this is what was in the school. So this is what I told her. I said, look, I'm not interested in teaching your daughter facts and figures. The basics are important. I get it. We'll go over some of the rules of ahkam, just the very basics. I said, your daughter is 15 years old. When she turns 16, she's going to leave Sunday school. And then what you're going to do is you're going to drag her to the masjid. I said, I only have one goal, and one goal only. And that is that she makes friends at Sunday school, and she gets inspired so that she'll come after she's 16. That's it. If she doesn't learn everything, every detail, if she doesn't learn every fact, because I did away with the tests even. I just said, I'm not even doing the tests. Okay, so when I worked with these young people, one of the things that I found is that their perception of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was their perception of how religion was taught to them. And it's also the reason why they wanted to leave religion. They wanted to leave religion because religion was taught to them in a particular way. If we don't teach in a way that's beautiful, that we explain who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, and His obedience, how that obedience is beautiful, then people would leave the religion. Okay? Now, I want to give you, there's a few hadith I want to cover, because I'm already at the end of my time. My topic today was doubt, but I just want to share some hadith here that are important, that's mentioned in terms of doubt. And it's a hadith of Imam Sajjad, alayhi salam. And he says that he talks about the things that cause the one to forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says that definitely the filling of the stomach, the weakness of will, the intoxication of being completely happy and satiated, and the delusion of power all hinder and delay one from the performance and cause one to forget Allah. Okay, so he lists 4 things. I'm not going to go into all 4, but these 4 things are very important for us, for our self-development. The first one is the filling of the stomach. Always constantly being obsessed with food. And in Shahr Ramadan, that's the purpose of this month. Purpose of this month, we think, is, okay, just restraint, 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 restraint. But the restraint is there because when we have a little restraint in the stomach, what happens is that causes the soul to awaken. Right? So what does Shahr Ramadan do? We eat during the year, and it does CPR on the soul. The way it does that is it holds back that food. When that food is held back, then the soul has the ability to become inspired. Now the soul can actually realize things. Now it's hard. People say, well, I'm thinking about food, I'm thinking about food, I know. The purpose of Shahr Ramadan is to break that constant thinking about food, constant thinking about satisfying ourselves. When we break that, then eventually the mind will move to something else. Eventually the mind will stop and say, oh my God, I can't get food. What else can I think of? I can't get all the pleasures of the body. So now the soul is forced to awaken. And now the soul starts slowly, day 1. The soul starts yearning and becoming hungry for something. Day 2, the soul gets a little hungrier. Day 3, day 4, day 5. And so Shahr Ramadan is not an exercise in each day, it's an exercise in the whole month. The soul is traversing from day to day to day. So if we start off the month and we think, oh my God, I've gone 5 days, this is hard, I don't feel spiritual, it's okay. Because what we're doing is we're breaking the soul at that point. We're breaking the body in order to awaken the soul. We're breaking the body to awaken the soul. It's not because we're hungry that we're not feeling spiritual. Until the body completely says, I'm hungry, but I'm just not going to think about it, then finally the soul can awaken. Okay? The second thing I want to mention, which is a hadith, is that a hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam, which is really important in this month. And this has been mentioned in more than one hadith, is avoid dispute, avoid argumentation, because it brings about doubt. Now, it's not just argumentation when we argue and argue and argue and argue. It's not just argumentation brings about doubt because we're arguing and maybe we'll hear somebody else's opinion and cognitively it'll create this doubt in our mind. It's not just because of that. It's that arguing itself corrupts the soul. Sometimes you'll see people, they'll argue about also, it's one thing to discuss something is one thing, but to argue about something is different. You'll see people, they'll get into these deep arguments about politics, about even religion, about things, and even worse than that is to get into arguments about irrelevant things. I mean, I just see people get into arguments about, people are arguing about, like, and they're passionate about, oh, this car is better than this car. Oh, this is better than this. Oh, this. It's like, why are you wasting you're wasting your life and corrupting the soul. So this, we spoke about the tongue yesterday. Okay, and one of the things that the tongue can do that can destroy the soul, that can corrupt the soul, is argumentation. Okay, the first place, the easiest place to argue is at home. It's the first place that shaitan can come in Shahr Ramadan. Sometimes it's better not to argue. Not because you're not right. Sometimes you're right. But your argumentation might be destroying your soul. Leave it if it's not important. It's very petty. Leave it. Because every time you argue, this makes the heart just a little bit darker. A little bit darker. Okay, last hadith I'll leave you with. Tomorrow, my topic tomorrow, God willing, is going to be moving through this doubt and finding God. And I want to leave you with this hadith. It's a hadith of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So in this beautiful hadith, the Imam says, he says, "O Allah, my own obscure doubts, these far off doubts, these strange doubts about the signs in nature has caused me distance from my goal." So what do doubts do? They cause us distance from the goal. The goal is God. Okay, the goal is not the doubt. So many people are like, I have to resolve the doubt. If I resolve the doubt, I'll get closer to God. No, it's not if you resolve the doubt. Sometimes the doubts are getting in the way of your goal. Your goal is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The doubt's just getting in the way. It's bothering you. So he says, my own obscure doubts about the signs in nature have caused my distance from my goal. So draw me near to you through your service, your khidmat, that may allow me to reach you. So now the Imam is asking Allah, oh Allah, there is this obedience to you. Allow me to come close to you through this obedience, through this. Don't just make it a ritual. Make it something more than a ritual. Make this obedience to you a means to come close to you. And then the Imam asks, how can something that needs you for its very existence be used to prove your existence? Second thing the Imam is saying is, I realize that I'm in need. We'll talk about this more tomorrow, inshallah. And then he says, are other things more manifest than you that may be used to point to you? Point number 3, Allah is the most manifest thing out of everything in this universe. And last thing he says, when were you ever absent that you should need anything to prove your existence? So the fourth thing is for a servant to recognize in their life and think of, when was God ever absent from my life? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us ma'rifah of Him. In this month, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us obedience of Him, to inspire our soul, to inspire our children's soul. We ask Allah to heal all those who are sick of the body. We ask Allah to help heal those who are sick in the heart. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect all of those mu'mineen, all of those who have taqwa in this community and around the world, every place of those who are the Shia of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi tahirin.
اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن حسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.